Just when it seemed like the Democratic Party establishment couldn't get any more desperate in their attempts to distract us from the fact that they're still not really offering anything to voters, we get this. Democrats file suit alleging Russia-Trump campaign WikiLeaks conspired to interfere in 2016 campaign. And no, this isn't an article from The Onion, even though I will say that The Onion's satirical take on this is pretty spot on. To the Democratic Party staying focused on the 2016 election and rehashing it again and again and again and again, it's one way for them to not talk about the one thing that we want them to talk about. Policy. So it feels like we're living the same day over and over again, where we have to relitigate the 2016 election, but not the parts that they don't want to look at, where they rigged the primary. They only want to look at the parts where they claim that they were victimized. So according to CNN, the Democratic National Committee is suing the Trump campaign, Russia, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, and several relatives and associates of President Donald Trump, alleging a grand conspiracy that harmed Democrats through WikiLeaks' publication of internal party emails during the 2016 presidential campaign. The 66-page lawsuit filed in Manhattan federal court on Friday lays out how the Trumps allegedly curried favor in Russia through their family businesses, and then Russians allegedly used those connections before the presidential election to disseminate the spoils from a cyber attack on the DNC. In the Trump campaign, Russia found a willing and active partner in this effort to disrupt the presidential election, the Democratic Committee alleges. Judge John G. Kodal, a Clinton appointee, will preside over the case. The Democratic Party alleges the conspiracy and the hacking hurt their relationship with voters, chilled donations, disrupted their political convention, and subjected their staffers to harassment. The lawsuit outlines nearly every known communication between Trump advisors and Russians. In all, it alleges a dozen crimes from racketeering and conspiracy to wiretapping and trade secret violations. Now, there's actually quite a bit of defendants named in this lawsuit, ranging from Donald Trump Jr. to George Papadopoulos, Roger Stone, and even Julian Assange. So there's two things that I want to talk about with regard to the DNC lawsuit. First is the glaring hypocrisy. And second of all is the implications that this has on freedom of the press. So when it comes to their hypocrisy, my favorite part of the lawsuit is the claim that, quote, the hacking hurt their relationship with voters, chilled donations, and disrupted their political convention, and subjected their staffers to harassment. So in other words, if WikiLeaks didn't expose them as the frauds that they are who rigged the primary, then everything would be peachy keen right now. Except that's not true. We already knew that the Democratic Party was rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders because their actions were brazen. Everything they did was calculative and deliberately intended to hurt Bernie Sanders. We saw that. You scheduled debates the weekend before Christmas. It was obvious. WikiLeaks just confirmed what we already knew. So they're essentially arguing here, don't blame us for what we did. Blame the messenger who exposed what we did and our crime against democracy. And think about the irony here. They're literally suing WikiLeaks for what they call rigging the election and interfering in the 2016 election because WikiLeaks exposed how they rigged an election. That's what they're suing WikiLeaks for. So by doing this, obviously, it's nothing more than political grandstanding. And what they're trying to do is claim that this is more, than them just trying to score cheap political points. This is really about democracy and fighting to protect elections. And DNC Chairman Tom Perez made the rounds on cable news to make sure that we knew just how much the Democratic Party cares about democracy.
Chairman, why now?
Why now? Three reasons, Chris. Number one, we don't know how long the criminal proceedings will take, and nor do we want to rush that. And so we have to file in order to preserve our rights under the civil justice system, statute of limitations, things of that nature. So we have that legal imperative. Number two, over the course of the last year, I've done my homework. A year ago, it was clear to me that the Russians had hacked the DNC, and they did it with the purpose of helping Donald Trump and hurting the Democrats. But we didn't have the evidence a year ago connecting the Russians and the Trump campaign. We have that evidence now, and that's why we move forward. And thirdly, Chris, I'm worried about the 2018 elections. There is no accountability for what the Russians did. And when they do things with impunity because this administration won't hold them accountable, we've got to hold them accountable. That's what the civil justice system is about. It's about accountability. It's about deterrence. Our democracy is on fire, and we have to preserve our democracy. We've got to preserve full and fair elections, and that's a big part of what this is about.
But the entities aren't going to be held accountable before the 2018 midterms, right? I mean, I've been around civil litigation a little bit, and boy, does that take a while.
Well, absolutely, we won't finish the case before now, but we want to send a very, very clear signal. If you want to mess with elections here, there are going to be consequences. We are raising the cost of your interference. We know that this administration is Putin's poodle, and so they're not going to do anything. So we will continue to act. If you want to do that, if you're going to punch us, quite frankly, Chris, we're going to punch back. And that's what this lawsuit is about. We are protecting our democracy. When you go after the right to vote, when you go after the institution of elections, that is the essence of our democracy. So this wasn't simply an attack on the DNC. This was an attack on our democracy. Our democracy is at risk here. We have to make sure that the elections coming up in November are fair. And they invaded us the last time. They hacked the DNC. They tried to influence the outcome of the election. There's no accountability in the White House, and why wouldn't they do it again? I believe in doing your homework, and over the course of the last year, we have seen, I think, a mountain of evidence of collusion between the campaign and the Russians to basically affect our democracy. And our democracy is at risk. This was an assault on our democracy, and we have to protect that. Preserving our democracy is priceless. And when you have elections that have been attempted, you've seen attempted interference in the past, they're going to do it again. That's what we believe in as Democrats. Elections should be fair. I understand people may agree and disagree, but you know what? We're fighting for them.
You heard that right. Democrats are the ones fighting for free and fair elections. This is breaking news to me because I always thought that it was the Democratic Party that didn't care about democracy. Because as they claim to fight for free and fair elections, dozens of state Democratic parties still block independents from participating in Democratic Party primaries. They refuse to still abolish superdelegates, and they're crippling the campaigns of progressives across the country because state parties are continuing to cut off progressives' access to NGP van. They're leaving progressives out of polling so that way they won't qualify for state debates when they do have them. They refuse to investigate ballot destruction in Broward County, Florida. And let's not forget that their attorneys literally just argued last year that Democratic Party bigwigs can get together in a smoke-filled room and pretty much unilaterally choose who the Democratic Party nominee should be if they wanted to do that. There's really no shortage of examples to demonstrate how little the Democratic Party still values democracy. And that's not even taking into account the fact that they brazenly rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders in 2016, so much so that current DNC Chairman Tom Perez had to fess up and admit that the primaries were rigged. Temporarily, of course, until he backtracked. I mean, this is a party that was shameless in the way that they did the bidding for Hillary Clinton. Everything from the debate schedule to superdelegates. I mean, they were shameless. And now we have Tom Perez going on cable news crying about how Russia attacked them by exposing how the DNC tried to stack the deck against Bernie Sanders. It's ridiculous. Now, in the midst of all of Tom Perez's insufferable political grandstanding that you saw there, the irony was apparently lost on him, because everything that he said about how Russia interfered in the 2016 election is also applicable to what the DNC did. So literally all you have to do is change the word Russian to DNC with this quote.
I'm worried about the 2018 elections. There is no accountability for what the Russians did.
Well, let's change that. I'm worried about the 2018 elections. There's no accountability for what the DNC did. Still true, there's been no accountability. The DNC fraud lawsuit was dismissed, and they still won't even admit that they rigged the primaries in 2016. So if you actually care about democracy like you say you do, Tom, you have to prove it to us. You have to walk the walk. But the DNC is dragging its feet to just reduce superdelegates. The DNC Unity Reform Commission recommended a cut of superdelegates when they should be abolished entirely, so it was already a compromise, and now they're dragging their feet. They don't even want to do that. But here they are, claiming that they give a fuck about democracy. Get the fuck out of here. I mean, I can't take the hypocrisy. It's insane. This is nothing more than political grandstanding. It's just a way for them to gin up support ahead of the midterm election. But it's not just about them trying to fundraise off of this, because it's obvious that that's what they're doing. But this actually has broader implications for the First Amendment and press freedom in this country, something that they also claim to care about. Because as The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald and Trevor Tim report, the DNC suit, as it pertains to WikiLeaks, poses a grave threat to press freedom. The theory of the suit, that WikiLeaks is liable for damages it caused when it willfully and intentionally disclosed the DNC's communications, would mean that any media outlet that publishes misappropriated documents or emails, exactly what media outlets quite often do, could be sued by the entity or person about which they are reporting, or even theoretically prosecuted for it, or that any media outlet releasing an internal campaign memo is guilty of economic espionage. It is extremely common for media outlets to publish or report on materials that are stolen, hacked, or otherwise obtained in violation of the law. In October 2016, 1 month before the election, someone mailed a copy of Donald Trump's 1995 tax returns to the New York Times, which published parts of it, even though it is illegal to disclose someone's tax returns without the taxpayer's permission. In March of 2017, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow did the same thing with Trump's 2005 tax returns. In April of 2016, the Washington Post obtained and published a confidential internal memo from the Trump campaign. Media outlets constantly published private companies' internal documents. Just 3 weeks ago, BuzzFeed obtained and published a secret Facebook memo outlining the company's internal business strategies, the contents of which were covered by most major media outlets. So make no mistake about it, this sets a dangerous precedent, because if they are actually successfully able to win this lawsuit, well, what does that mean for news outlets that want to publish information that was obtained illegally? That they won't really be able to do this. And understand the hypocrisy here. They're not in favor of anything being published with regard to their hacked emails, but when it comes to Donald Trump's tax returns, that's fair game. They haven't come out to denounce it. So they are so hypocritical. There are no words to describe the level of hypocrisy that this party continues to exude. It's just mind-boggling to me. And look, even Barack Obama knew that you can't go after outlets, news outlets that published leaked info. Even Obama, even though he was against whistleblowers, he waged a war on whistleblowers. He didn't go after WikiLeaks when they published the information that Chelsea Manning brought to them. He went after Chelsea Manning when he found out that Chelsea Manning was their source. This is new. They want to go after the news outlet. They want to discourage news outlets from publishing anything that's obtained illegally, when that's what news outlets do. So, this party, they are fundamentally broken. More specifically, the DNC is broken, but I mean, they are the leading organization for the Democratic Party. And understand that last week we learned that the DNC is still funneling money to Hillary Clinton's new super PAC Onward Together, when they could be giving that money to state parties. Now, this lawsuit will cost potentially millions of dollars. More money that could be going to state parties. Now, when Tom Perez was asked about this and how he could justify spending money on this when state parties are still starved, well, he refused to answer the question.
How much money is this going to cost the DNC? How much money are you taking away from 2018 to focus on 2016 in Russia?
Chuck, we can't afford not to do this, because when you look ahead and you see what was done before and what they're trying to do again, our democracy is at stake. It's hard to win elections when you have interference in elections.
You didn't answer. How much money is this lawsuit going to take this year? Millions?
I don't know. I don't know the amount of money that it will take, but I'll tell you, it's hard to put a price tag on preserving democracy. And you know what? That's why I concluded that it would be irresponsible of me not to do this.
So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the Democratic Party's priorities. That money could be going to state parties, which would then give that money to candidates and help Democrats get elected. But they don't care about getting Democrats elected. They're paid to lose. They're paid to lose. They don't care. Now, since this is clearly ridiculous, Tom Perez made sure that he took extra steps to stick to the script this time. Take a look.
Chairman, why now?
Why now? 3 reasons, Chris. Well, there are 3 reasons, Judy. There are 3 basic reasons. Number 1, we don't know when Director Mueller will finish his investigation, and he should take all the time he needs to do a thorough job. I don't know when Director Mueller's investigation is going to end, nor would I ever ask him, because I want him to do a good, thorough job. Over the course of the last year, I've done my homework. We've done our homework.
And then he said the Wendy Wasserman Schultz servers, I think he then later corrected to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a document held by the Pakistani mystery man and Clinton emails. The people you've sued have gotten your attention, I guess.
Well, I mean, I saw that response, and it was kind of a greatest hits of all their wild conspiracy theories. Those are almost the precise quotes we heard from the Nixon campaign in 1972. And the response when that lawsuit was filed was almost identical to what we saw today. So it seems like the Trump folks and the Nixon folks, once again, there's yet another thing that they have in common.
So look, what more do you need to know about the Democratic Party, the DNC? They're frauds, they're hypocrites, they're the biggest hypocrites in the world, but you can never mention their hypocrisy, you can never mention the contents of that email. They were exposed, they were caught with their pants down, fucking over Sanders supporters. But they're the victims, and now they're suing because they've been so victimized. The sad news is that this lawsuit actually has a chance of going through. So we'll see. But, I mean, you'd think that this would be embarrassing for them, and some Democrats, credit where it's due, like Claire McCaskill, are saying that this is nothing more than a silly distraction, because it is.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.